Hello, everyone, and welcome to Binging Barbie, a Barbie movie podcast. My name is Jay, and I'm here with my co-host,
John.
and we are going to talk about Barbie, specifically the Barbie movies. Now, the idea for this podcast came about when John and I realized during one of our Skype conversations that the new live-action Barbie movie is about a year away from release,
Mhm.
and that just happens to be the perfect time frame in which to watch all of the Barbie movies, one per week, all of the animated classic Barbie movies, and discuss them. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to watch Barbie movies and talk about them.
Yeah. Also, this was a joke. I I didn't actually mean for us to do this. I just said it jokingly. Then you were serious about it and you came up with a schedule. And I'm just here because you forced me to be here.
Yes. That is what you're along for the ride. I'm driving this car. We don't know where it's going,
Yeah.
but we're here. This is
Yeah.
this is our first episode. Today we will be discussing Barbie and the Nutcracker, the first Barbie animated movie of this sort of modern era of Barbie movies.
Right.
Before we get into it, let's discuss a bit our history with Barbie. So I'll start.
Okay.
I My house, we had Barbies as kids. My sisters had Barbies, and we actually watched a lot of these movies when I was growing up. We I actually watched this movie Barbie and the Nutcracker on the DVD that my family had when I was a kid. So I'm familiar with it. I wouldn't say I was ever a huge fan of Barbie. But yeah, looking back, it's kind of interesting to see these movies and get to revisit them sort of with a little bit of nostalgia, but also a more critical eye.
Yeah, I'm on the opposite end. I don't think we had Barbies in our house growing up. Or if we did, it was at the point where my sister had grown past it and she got rid of them. Because I don't remember ever having Barbie in my house. Um, my cousins, though, whenever I'd visited them, they would have Barbies, and I would destroy their dolls. Because I was a brilliant child. No, the closest thing I had to a Barbie doll was GI Joe. Because they're clearly the same thing.
Yep.
And yeah, I
Very
didn't see any of these
similar.
movies. I'd never seen any of these movies before. Um, but I am someone who likes to watch My Little Pony. So I guess this is around the same corner of content of just more aimed towards a younger audience, more towards little girls. So I guess I'm used to this type of content. So we'll see after this whole year of Barbie.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so these Barbie movies are interesting. They're a product of, well, Mattel, who owns Barbie, and they decided that they in 2000, well, in the early 2000s, that they wanted to see if Barbie could sustain her own straight to video movie franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And it spun off into this sort of very successful but very niche franchise. It's kind of been rebooted over the years as new kids enter and older kids leave the fandom. And yeah, they started out with these first few Barbie movies are sort of adaptations of fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of the fairy tales that weren't already adapted by Disney. So the Nutcracker is kind of a quintessential one where it feels like there should be a Disney movie of the Nutcracker, and there is a now a live action version. But there isn't a classic Disney version. So Barbie gets to come in and kind of they make their own version of this with Barbie,
Mm-hmm.
sort of separate from any other preconceived ideas of like there's a few adaptations of the Nutcracker, but this is one of the few filmed adaptations to have gotten any kind of traction.
Right. The closest thing that Disney has done with Nutcracker would be in Fantasia, which doesn't entirely follow the story of the Nutcracker, only in
Which
some
to
tidbits.
yeah, to be fair, the Barbie movie is a very loose adaptation. And I think we'll get into that later.
Right.
Um, but let's start with just some general information on the movie. So this was released October 2nd, 2001 on VHS,
Oh boy.
directed by Owen Hurley, who he directed the first three Barbie movies and then also a later movie in the series, which we will obviously be getting to. He's an animation director. He's done a lot of TV and home video and also video game cutscenes. So
Yeah.
that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Helps for
It
this.
yeah. The movie was written by Linda Engelsapian and Hilary Hinkle and Rob Hudnut. So Linda and Hilary are a writing duo who mainly wrote for TV and home video, and then Rob did mainly producing work and actually worked on a lot of these Barbie movies. So he'll be able to be seen again. Um, the music is a very important part of this movie, and that was actually recorded by the London Symphony Orchestra. Of course, it's the iconic um, Tchaikovsky pieces written for the original Nutcracker ballet. And the ballet choreography was actually done by the New York City Ballet, and the animation is rotoscoped from those performances. So when you're seeing them perform in the movie, even though it's animated, it's actual ballet performances that have been animated, which kind of grounds them in this reality despite the animation style.
Yeah, which is a cool detail.
Yeah.
Especially back then, I don't recall there being that many uh, motion capture stuff in cartoons or films that I could recall. There were a couple of moments, even just not part of the dance sequence, where the movements of the characters felt very natural, as if it was being rotoscoped. I mean, motion captured. So it was just it's neat. You don't really see that much this time.
Yeah, and it's really well sort of done. It looks perfectly well integrated into the rest of the environments. Well, as well integrated as anything else.
Sure.
You can definitely tell that this is a production working on a smaller budget, smaller scale. But you can also tell that a lot of thought and effort was put into this. It doesn't feel like sort of a just a job for the people behind this. It feels like they're actually passionate and looking to add a bit of artistry to it. Um, yeah, it's really interesting in that sense. I don't think anyone would argue this movie is a masterpiece. Um, it's rough around the edges, to say the least.
I mean, I don't know. The people, they will fight. They love
Yeah,
these
yeah,
movies.
yeah.
I don't know why.
It certainly has its charms, but it's not gonna necessarily stand up to the classics of cinema. But as a direct to video Barbie movie, I think it has some interesting things, and also maybe some less interesting things. So, do you have any general thoughts before we dive right in?
General thoughts before diving right in. Like I said earlier, uh, motion capture didn't really seem that much. Generally, the animation for this time was pretty decent considering the budget they had. So well done for them.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce kind of the framing for this podcast. We're going to be evaluating these movies on 5 different criteria, and then rating them based on those criteria. So we have the story, the characters, the animation, the voice acting, and the writing. And based on those, we'll give it an overall score and see kind of where we think it falls.
From a
For
range
me,
of 1 to 5 for
yeah,
each
yeah.
one.
And for me, I'm doing this kind of evaluating these as Barbie movies, as straight to video movies, rather than necessarily comparing these to other movies. Kind of just trying to take these on their own level. So a 5 here doesn't necessarily mean that I think it's the best thing ever. Just that for what it is, it's very well executed.
Okay. Well, I'm not that merciful. But yeah, for me, just a little point when I do my numbers. Whenever I do 5-star reviews, 3 for me is just a good average. It means it's basic, it's average. It's not bad. It's not great. It's good, fine. Anything above a 3 is like above average. So 3 is the place to be, unless it's very good. You don't want to be under a 3.
Yeah, and I would say I'm in a similar area, and we'll get into it once we get into the meat of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, let's talk a bit about the story. The very brief overview is that, well, we start with after the opening credits, a scene where Barbie and her sister Kelly are dancing this
That's her
ballet.
sister?
Yes, that is her sister.
Oh, that was a
Um,
student.
no, that is supposed to be her sister.
Okay.
And they're practicing this number from the Nutcracker, and Kelly just can't quite get the steps right. So Barbie takes this break and decides to tell this story. And within the story, Barbie plays the main character, who is Clara, who's a young woman in this sort of ambiguously European house. She and her brother live with their grandfather Drosselmeyer, which, side note, is a very very good name. Um, he's kind of this very much what you would expect from a grandfather character in this movie. And it's Christmas time, and their aunt Drosselmeyer visits and gives Clara a Nutcracker toy, who then gets injured by her brother, and that kind of causes a little bit of conflict. But
Mm-hmm.
the real story starts when Clara falls asleep and then wakes up to these this army of rats invading her room, kind of causing chaos. And then the Nutcracker leaps in to fight them. Clara gets shrunk down by the Mouse King, who's our primary antagonist for the movie, and now she has to go on this adventure through the Nutcracker's land in order to sort of return to her regular life, and also save this kingdom from the evil Mouse King. So it's a very standard fantasy adventure story. It's actually a lot of reviews of the movie at the time compared it to Wizard of Oz, which is kind of odd for a movie that is based on a different iconic fantasy story. The original Nutcracker story was written by E.T.A. Hoffman, published in 1816, and it's a bit different. It has less of an adventure to it. The Mouse King actually dies before they even go to this magic land. Um, and yeah, the ballet is then based off of that. And then we get this movie, which is kind of a synthesis of the ballet and of the original story and of a lot of other different fantasy adventure influences. And that is kind of, for me, the biggest weakness of the story is that it's drawing on a lot of other things it's very sort of standard,
Mm-hmm.
um, exactly what you would expect from this kind of movie. It's the well, she's in a magic land and now she has to save the day, and
Mm-hmm.
there's the prince and there's the wacky sidekicks. Um, it and it takes the original story, which is kind of unique in that they're the main villain of the original Nutcracker story is killed off halfway through. So the rest of the story is just sort of like doing stuff in this fantasy land with no real plot. Um, so to take that sort of interesting story structure and then make it more standard, you end up with just a lot of scenes of people running about and now we have to step over these floating stones, and it kind of feels like, oh, this is getting away from the original intent of the story. And
Yeah.
then my other problem with the story is that for being a Barbie movie, the Barbie character doesn't have much to do. She's a very passive protagonist in that a lot of things happen to her, but she doesn't make too many like active decisions. So a lot of the movie is they're running away from something, and then a magical creature appears and solves their problem for them,
Right.
rather than Barbie having to come up with the solutions herself. Or I guess I should say Clara, because Barbie is playing the character of Clara in this. And I think the biggest moment is that Clara doesn't even get to defeat the Mouse King. That's the prince's storyline,
Mm-hmm.
which is in the original story. But I think it would have been more impactful if the protagonist of the movie had gotten that big final heroic moment.
Right. Because the point of the story that's presented in this movie, Barbie is telling her sister Kelly something.
Barbie is telling her sister Kelly she needs to be brave. And this kind of gets into my problems with the characters as well. But Clara, as she's presented in the story, doesn't really change. She
No.
doesn't learn to be brave. She's just already brave,
Yeah.
which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it means that the lesson of the story doesn't really land because you don't see a change in the protagonist.
Right. Because the focus of the story really should have been the Nutcracker. He's the character who has to develop in the end to accept who he is, and it would work for Kelly. But instead, the end message is, if you're brave, then you'll be a princess.
Yeah, it's a and that is kind of the message of a lot of these movies is if you're brave, you'll be a princess.
Yeah.
But the problem is we don't see like Clara. There's no point in which Clara doesn't seem brave. Like one of the very first things she does is say, "Okay, fine, I'll go to the fantasy land,"
Right.
which is a very brave thing to do. But that means that in the end, when she's like, "Okay, fine, I'll go rescue the prince and the wacky sidekicks," she's just made the same decision she made before.
Hmm.
There's no change. Um, so she's kind of a stagnant character, and that makes the plot feel maybe a little bit boring.
Maybe the brave thing about this story is that she wants to leave behind her entire family just to be with this guy.
Yeah, that is. I think that is a thing that, and that's one of the things where this movie actually does kind of stray from the standard fantasy plot is that she does genuinely decide she wants to stay in this fantasy land, and it's only when the Mouse King sends her back to the real world that she goes back. She doesn't actually want to.
Right.
That isn't explored much,
No.
and it could have been. This is also a 70-minute movie, so they do have a very limited amount of time in which to do anything.
Right, but a lot of that time is taken by dance numbers.
Yes. Well, that's we'll discuss the dance numbers later. I
Right.
actually think there aren't enough dance numbers.
I
But
think there's too many, but sure.
but I do think like you don't need the scene where they're on the floating rocks and trying to cross the floating rocks, and then the rocks float in a weird way.
Well, I was ex- I was expecting there to be a dance number on the floating rocks because it's the
Yeah,
perfect thing to be a ballet on. Oh, you got to be
yeah,
very graceful on the rocks, but no, the rocks were just there.
yeah. It's I do have in my notes exactly in the floating rock scene, which is why I keep bringing it up.
Right.
I don't think any of this was in the original ballet. Like I I think they're just making stuff up to make this into an adventure movie rather than doing these ballet sequences or adapting the ballet.
Mm-hmm.
They're sort of forcing it into a different mold.
Yeah.
So yeah, I gave the story a 2 out of 5. Um, I think it's the weakest part of the movie. What about you?
I give it a 3. It was basic. I didn't think that anything was terrible about the story. It was just wasn't anything new. I didn't feel like there was anything in the story that was, I guess, bad. It was just there.
Yeah. So we give it a I gave it a 2, you gave it a 3. That
Yeah,
means our average score for this is 2.5.
correct.
So yeah, let's move on to the characters. We already discussed Clara quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she to me she's kind of a stagnant character.
Right.
And it wasn't until the end of the movie when Barbie basically says, "And that's why you should be brave," that I was like, "Oh yeah, the message of this movie is supposed to be bravery." Um, because that's one of the characteristics that Clara has, but it's not really emphasized all that
Mm-hmm.
much. Um, it's not a bad thing to a bad message or anything. It's just kind of odd given the rest of the movie that that was the focus they decided on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you have any other thoughts on Clara?
Uh, no. She was, she was what she was. Um, I guess there's more to say about her when it comes to the Nutcracker.
Yeah,
Um,
I will comment briefly. I think the character design for her is very good.
they're spot on with making her look like Barbie.
Yeah, and
But besides that, I don't know what else to say.
I mean, reading a bit about the production from Wikipedia, they had one animator who was just animating her hair,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
I
that
know.
tells you the amount of detail they put into her character design and her animation. I also think it's interesting that she doesn't have that many outfits throughout the movie. Um, Obviously, one of the ideas of these movies is that you have the movie and then you have the tie-in toy line so that kids will buy these Barbies so they can play along with the movie. But she spends the most of the movie in her sort of nightgown type dress.
Yeah.
It isn't till the end that she gets her transformation into her sparkly tutu with, and it's a good transformation sequence. I do think it's kind of hollow just because she hasn't changed as a on the inside. Um, but I do think it's an interesting choice not to constantly have her changing outfits because it means you can only really sell 2 or 3 outfits to go with this movie.
Plus, it's so much work to do a new costume.
Yeah, that may be what ended up being the reason.
Mm-hmm. Right. Um, I'll talk more later when I go through my notes. But let's move on to the Nutcracker himself.
Yeah. I thought he was interesting. I think, or I guess not interesting, I should say. He's a bit of a blank slate character. He's just kind of blandly charming, blandly handsome. I actually thought he was more handsome as the Nutcracker than as the prince in the end.
Clara was very much into the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
More, even when he was just the Nutcracker toy, like the way that she looked at that thing.
Yeah.
Oof.
It's the Beauty and the Beast problem, where when he transforms into the prince at the end, you're like, oh, that's it?
Where's his mustache?
Yeah. It's I mean, as he has maybe some of the worst lines in the movie as well. Just standard action lines of like, oh, I didn't even write them down. The only line of his I wrote down was "insolent mouse," which is just kind of like that's exactly what you expect the hero to say in this kind of movie. Yeah, I don't really. I think they're trying to do this thing with his character where he's this like irresponsible prince that was denied the throne when his dad died until he was mature enough. But we never get to see him being immature. Like he's already mature when the movie starts. So just like Clara, he doesn't really have anywhere to go as a character. He just kind of is waiting for, and he does have sort of this mini arc about being like, okay, maybe I am ready to be the king. But I don't know, it didn't, since he never grew in responsibility throughout. And also I do kind of question his dad's decision to put the evil mouse in charge of the kingdom instead of the son who was apparently irresponsible, but we don't see anything of that.
Yeah, no, I must have just missed that part.
Yeah.
He was just there to be the action guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I he could have been more interesting. I think both of the lead characters could have been more interesting.
Sure. But then we had the Mouse King.
Yes, the Mouse King is probably my favorite character in this thing. A lot of that is just the Mouse King is played by Tim Curry, and Tim Curry is awesome.
Yeah.
Just the best at this kind of like villain role. He's played basically the same character many times before.
But they're all great.
He just does
He's
it.
got a good voice for it.
Yeah, he knows exactly what to do with this role. He has some of the best lines in the movie. He has a good dynamic with the different characters. He has this cool little staff that's like the White Witch from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that turns things into stone. But then it also transforms, which is fun. Turns into a big rat at the end. He sort of kaijuifies himself.
Yeah.
My one question with this character is, again, why did this old wise king leave him in charge? Like, what's up with this? Maybe
I just
this
thought
old
that
wise
the Mouse King just took over.
No, he was put on the throne by the old wise king, who I'm starting to suspect wasn't so wise after all. It undercuts the ending of the movie where the prince says, "I will be as wise like my father."
I missed a lot of things, I guess.
Yeah.
Like by the end when he says that, I'll be wise, like with the wisdom of my father. I'm like, is his father alive? Is he dead? Where is he? How is he going to get his father's wisdom? Where's the father? I don't know.
Well, apparently his father didn't have much wisdom, given that the Mouse King was who is very blatantly evil. Like he isn't interested in hiding it or anything. He's
I,
just kind of
I mean, he was only wise because he thought, man, this Mouse King sounds like Tim Curry. I guess I gotta choose him.
I mean, yeah, that is a fair point.
Hmm.
Maybe the Mouse King isn't so bad after all. I mean, he is pretty bad, but that's
Yes.
his charm, actually.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah,
That's pretty much it.
yeah, he's a lot of fun. I actually I will get into it in the voice acting, but I didn't realize it was Tim Curry until about halfway through the movie. My first note on the Mouse King is, "Wow, this actor's doing a really good Tim Curry." And then halfway through the movie, it occurred to me, "Wait a second, this is Tim Curry." Um, so that was a fun discovery.
Mm,
But yeah, moving on. The next character we have is Major Mint, who's
right.
he's one of the wacky sidekicks. He doesn't have any character traits except that he is the most British character ever to be British.
Hmm.
Most of his lines are some British phrase followed by indignant British noises. Knickknacks. Oh,
Grave Googler. Chicken blinder.
yes, yeah, yes, exactly. You've just encapsulated his character perfectly.
That is his character, who doesn't like anybody. He's like, oh,
Yeah,
or their ideas.
it's kind of endearing, but not enough to make him an interesting character. I
There's no point to him or his
yeah,
character. At least Captain Candy had a little bit of an idea
yeah,
because he's the Nutcracker's friend.
yeah. This guy, it is kind of. I do think it's weird when you take a step back and go, why is one of the major characters in the first ever Barbie movie a British guy, an old British guy who just kind of follows them for the adventure?
Right.
Like he's one of the in the band of four main characters who go off adventuring together. He's one of the four.
I mean, I could say the same about why is in the first Barbie movie, why is there a Nutcracker?
Good point. But the
Why is there a
Nutcracker
Mouse
is at
King?
least
I don't know.
those are at least characters from sort of iconic fairy tales.
But no,
Whereas Major Mint is
it's just very strange that the very first Barbie movie that they make is the Nutcracker.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
an odd choice.
Yeah, I mean, Rapunzel is the next movie, and that seems more.
When you think of Barbie, you think more of her slice of life stuff, her
Yeah,
many careers, not fairy tale.
which at this time, this was right after the Disney Renaissance, where they
Mm,
kind of brought back the fairy tale, especially in animated form. So I think in that context, it maybe makes a little more sense.
mm, mm.
I believe this was also the around the time that Disney launched their Disney Princesses line, which was sort of this marketing tactic to resurrect old properties, fold in the new Disney Renaissance properties, and kind of get girls interested in princess toys again. Um, so I think Barbie's kind of, or Mattel is kind of trying to make their own Disney princesses line with these Barbie movies.
Yeah, because Barbie is actually surprisingly very competitive
Yes,
of a toy company.
yes. It's, I mean, Barbie might be the most well known toy in the world,
Besides Lego.
besides Lego, maybe.
But like
They're
toy
close.
character
Yeah,
by
yeah,
themselves, the best.
yeah,
Lego as just a brand.
yeah. It's definitely like, yeah, taking a step back, saying this is the first Barbie movie ever, and then you realize, wait a second, why are all of the characters men except for the protagonist and
The children.
the children, and the owl and the ant, who have very, very small roles.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting choice. But yeah, on that note, we have Captain Candy next. He's the sort of, I believe he's supposed to be an Indian character. He doesn't have much to do.
You couldn't really tell besides his appearance.
Yeah, which I am glad, because if you look at animation from around this time and the portrayal of Indian characters, usually it's exaggerated accents and like sort of garish costuming and very, very stereotypical.
Yes.
So I think in that sense, this feels a little bit more restrained. But he really doesn't make much of an impact on anything. Him and Major Mint are just kind of like the two wacky sidekicks that get up to shenanigans in the background of the frame.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tis a shame.
Yep. And I don't know. I don't think either of those characters needed to be in the movie.
No.
And given how much Clara and the Nutcracker, they need better character arcs, and I think they honestly need a better romance. I didn't buy the romance between them until the scene of them dancing at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could have cut these characters out and had a better story. I do, however, think that Pym, who's the bat, he was fun.
No, he wasn't.
He was a good foil to the Mouse King.
Ah.
I will admit, I went into this thinking he was going to be the annoying animal sidekick, and he was. But he's in a lot less of the movie than a lot of annoying animal sidekicks are.
Right, but his whole role was to be the comedic goon character with our villain, which we have so many of those. So when he came up, I was like, no.
Yeah, he's filling a very stereotypical role. I thought in that role he was less annoying than he could have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But there he was.
But there he was, indeed.
Yeah. No, like, part of it is the voice for the character. Just doesn't match anything else that the other characters were doing. It just took me way out of the film because he's the most distinct voice, because it's just so completely different.
Yeah,
he's the most cartoonish voice in this film.
I think he works alongside the Mouse King somewhat, but I do kind of agree that I wouldn't say I liked his character. I just thought he was better than he could have been.
Sure.
And yeah, beyond that, we have a few like minor characters. We have Clara's brother, who's just kind of a brother. Like that's his character trait. He's the annoying little brother. Then we have Grandpa Drosselmeyer, who doesn't do much. He's kind of holding Clara back. We get the sense that because Clara looks up to her aunt, who's this sort of world traveler, very like an explorer. But Grandpa Drosselmeyer does not like that. So you get the sense that he's kind of sheltering her maybe a little.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is based on scenes and dialogue, really just grasping at any narrative straws here for that character. Yeah, I think that's pretty much every one of importance.
Yeah, besides the children.
Besides the children, yeah, they factor in very little as well.
Yeah, I mean they bring the people together to the revolt,
Yes.
but they don't actually do anything to revolt.
Yep. They're very much copy pasted character
They're
or
all
children
talk and no
characters.
show.
Yep. Well, yeah, because all of the people got carted in there anyway.
Right.
So yeah, I gave the characters a 3 out of 5. I think that's mainly for the Mouse King. Because he's a fun villain. I don't think anyone else makes much of an impression. I think Clara is a good character. She just doesn't get an arc. Because she has a lot of good traits. And I like moments, especially like my favorite moment with her is that invisible wall thing where she figures out all on her own, like, oh, this room is being guarded, but it's empty, and there's this like wall I can't get past, and then she just grabs a torch and shatters it. It's a
There's no
moment of
point to that moment. It just adds 30
yeah.
seconds and that's it.
It shows off that she is intelligent.
We know that when she already figured out that the Nutcracker was in fact the prince without any information.
That was one of my favorite parts, was that she did figure out that he was the prince. That it wasn't
as soon as they were talking the prince, I wrote down Nutcracker is the prince.
Yeah.
Then of course Clara says, and it's like, huh, she's smart.
Yeah. I do think it's fun to have little moments that just like, and since she's talking you through the thought process, it feels like they're highlighting her cleverness, which then would make you think that this movie is about cleverness, but it isn't. It's about bravery, apparently.
Yeah. Sure.
So yeah,
I gave it a 3 as well.
Okay. So our average score is 3 for that. That's easy enough.
3.
Yeah. On to next up, we have the animation. This is sort of, we already talked a bit about the dance sequences, and I think we're going to disagree on this. The dance numbers are my favorite part, because they're rotoscoped. They have a physicality to them, and the movements are accurate to what you would see in a ballet.
Right.
And given that this is an adaptation of a famous ballet, perhaps the most famous ballet, I have in my notes multiple times, I wish there was more ballet, because it adds sort of personality to this that I think the action scenes just kind of don't. The action scenes are just movement and noise, whereas the ballet, you're getting character dynamics, you're getting different sort of expressions of ideas. And on that note, I think the best dance in the movie is the dance between Clara and Eric after the Mouse King has been defeated, or pretty much defeated.
Yeah.
Because it is there's nothing else going on during this dance. Like, there's a brief cutaway to greenery growing throughout the land again, but besides that, it is just the dance, and it's focusing on the movements and the space around them, and the cinematography is highlighting what they're doing, and it's no dialogue, there's no like jokes, no visual gags. It's just, let's just watch these two people dance for 2 minutes. And that's not something you see in a kids movie all that often, particularly not a Barbie straight to video movie.
Yeah. Animation wise, the dance parts are really well done because they are motion capture and real dance movements. But for me, I do a lot of work in theater. It's my major. And so for me, we do a lot of musicals. And musicals are some of my least favorite stuff to watch and stuff. I just don't like dance numbers or songs if they don't really affect the story or the plot. If they're just there to show off the technical movement, like, yeah, let's dance, let's show this thing off. And if they don't have a really detailed explanation of the characters or what's happening, to me, they're just a waste of time. I don't like sitting there and watching it. So for me, just watching all these dance numbers, they took away from the story for me. I was like, okay, move on to what's next. I get it. You can dance.
Yeah, so I would guess then the Clara and Eric dance is probably your least favorite because there's the least going on during that.
No. I for me, my least favorite dance was the Major Mint and Captain Candy.
Oh, okay. I
Because
didn't even think of that as one of the dance sequences.
at least like that, it's, sure, it's about those two, it's their relationship and whatever.
Yeah.
But Captain Candy and Major Mint just dance for no reason. They're
Yeah.
celebrating their win, but like what? I don't know.
There is a reason for them to dance, and that's that they needed to fill a few extra minutes to get the runtime up to feature length.
Yeah, and of course to use that song as well.
Yes.
But still.
What did you think of the very, very final dance of Barbie and Kelly in the real world in the dance studio?
My note that I wrote was another dance.
Yeah, it is weird that it comes so close after.
Plus, they're using the same music
Yeah,
as the last dance that we saw, so
yeah.
it was expected to see them dance, but for having them use the same song that they just played, it's kind of And she nailed that dance without practicing it again. She's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
this
well, she
story.
just needed to be brave.
Like, no, Barbie just detailed the dance number that they actually, the Eric and Clara dance to the point where she understood all the movements.
Yeah, I think the implication is that they've been practicing this particular dance for a while.
We know, yeah, we know,
But
but
it,
still.
I really liked it. I think they do a good job, especially doing close-ups on like the footwork, so that you get a good
Yeah.
look at what's going on there. Which one of the benefits of having an animated ballet movie is that you can do a lot more with the camera because you aren't relying on sort of physical spaces.
Mm.
So I thought that was really interesting. Um, but I do kind of agree that it comes very close after the last dance sequence, and the dance sequences are really like consolidated into very specific areas, and I kind of wish they had been throughout the movie more.
Right.
Because there are like long stretches. There might even be 20 minutes in the middle somewhere with no dance sequences.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily what you want in a movie that is supposedly an adaptation of a ballet.
But yeah, again, animation wise, they're well done because,
Yeah.
actual dances.
I think this is where a lot of the passion comes in, like the artistic vision of the movie.
Where the animation struggles, for me at least, would be during the fight sequences. Because
Yes.
the movement can be very janky, especially in the opening fighting with the mice. Just the movement just didn't look right.
Yeah. And for the Nutcracker, it makes sense because he's made out of wood.
Right, but
But
they
for
didn't
the
really
other
utilize
characters,
that his
yeah,
type of movement very well.
yeah,
He kind of walked normally. I was hoping that they would stylize him a bit more, besides just the mouth and eyes.
yeah. I would agree. I think you can tell this was made for a lower budget.
Right.
Um, it isn't like if you did a side to side with other animated movies from 2001, it doesn't look as egregious. Um, but this is also the year that Monsters Inc. and Shrek came out, so there's better animation out there at this point in
Right.
time. Just not for this budget, of course.
Of course.
I like the character design. I wouldn't say I loved any of the character designs except the Nutcracker was a good, like, they didn't try to make it look different than a Nutcracker. The Nutcracker actually looked like an actual Nutcracker.
Correct.
And the world design, even though I couldn't tell you for the life of me what the name of this world is, the design of it was kind of interesting.
Parthenia.
Yeah, it's not like, it's very generic Fantasyland, but I thought especially the 2D backdrops were cool. And I like that they kind of satirized the 2D backdrops with an actual scene where the characters walk into a 2D backdrop and it's a trap that is a cardboard cut out of a castle.
Mm-hmm. There's really only one moment where I thought that the 2D backdrop really stood out to me, is when they first implemented it. When they first walked into Parthenia and gave us this wide shot of the surrounding land. The thing that I noticed is that when they did that, the 3D models were stiff. They didn't give them any movements during that wide shot. They just stood straight still, like they were just images of the characters and not the actual models that they had. It was kind of weird looking.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you can definitely tell it's straining against the budget a little bit.
Of course.
And I think part of the reason I like the 2D backdrops is that it's in contrast to the 3D animation, which is at times a little bit rough around the edges.
Mm.
So yeah, with the caveat that this is a movie that hasn't aged as well, I still gave the animation a 4 out of 5, specifically for these dance numbers that are very well animated and the rotoscoping work that went into this.
Right. I give it a 3 just because of the age. It hasn't aged as well as others.
Yeah.
It's still good, though. Especially at the time.
Yeah.
But
I think
it's had an age.
I think someone wouldn't necessarily have to watch this full movie, but the dance sequences are worth revisiting. Just because they're interesting as pieces of art in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, next up we have the voice acting, which you'll have more to say on these than I will. I'm not all that familiar with voice acting. But let's start with Kelly Sheridan, who plays Barbie and Clara.
Mm-hmm. Going after Kelly.
Yep. She's played Barbie in many movies since this one.
She is most of the voice of Barbie throughout all these movies.
Yep. All the way 2001 to 2015. So that's a 14-year tenure as Barbie.
And a little bit more here and there.
Yeah.
As well. But as she's also known for voicing other things, like more recently she was in My Little Pony. She started in season 5, but yeah, like a lot of these voice casts from this movie, because they're based in Canada, they have a lot of voice actors from My Little Pony. So I have personally met some of them at conventions. So I have met Kelly and a couple other people here. So that's a cool detail that I enjoy. But they're very nice persons. Kelly, I think, did a good job at just giving like a bit of emotion to this character who doesn't have a whole lot of character. So what I feel is that she does a good job of making you part of the character along for the journey. Maybe not so much giving so much personality. We're like, oh, they're this comedic or there's dramatic, but she does a good job of giving you this character that you can trust, that you know is intelligent.
Yeah, she kind of gives what you want from a Barbie performance, which
Mm-hmm.
is sort of this performance that you can imagine coming out of a doll and being a part of a kid's playing with these dolls. Um, I think she's my second favorite in the movie, and that's only because Tim Curry is so good.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she knocks it out of the park. There's a reason they kept bringing her back for these movies, and yeah, she kind of is in a lot of ways the definitive voice of Barbie for a lot of people.
Right.
And she earns that sort of reputation.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say.
Yeah. Next up, we have Kirby Morrow as the Nutcracker slash Prince Eric. This is his only Barbie movie, and he's more of a voice actor, but
Yeah.
he's done live action work as well, usually as like, you know, characters who have one line of dialogue. Like in the RoboCop reboot, apparently he played a character that didn't even have a name, but was in it.
Yeah, apparently. But yeah, Kirby Morrow. So a fun detail about this movie is that there are two actors, Kirby Morrow and Ian James Corlett. They both voiced the character Goku in Dragon Ball Z for two different dubs, for the Ocean dub and Funimation, which is interesting. Kirby is also known for playing the character Cole from Ninjago, and has sadly passed away a couple years ago.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he does a fine job here. I
Yeah,
think,
just the basic
yeah,
nice guy hero.
yeah. I think the problem with the Nutcracker in this movie is that the writing isn't good enough, not the voice acting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but on to the next performance, we have Tim Curry as the Mouse King.
The goat.
Yep, and he was also in Barbie and the Three Musketeers, which we will be discussing very soon. He's just a legendary actor. He's done so many things. He's an iconic villain actor. And he's kind of famous for, even in these smaller movies, he still gives it his all. And you can tell here that he's having fun with the role. He's hamming it up a little bit. Um, I would say he's the best part of the movie outside of maybe the dance sequences.
He's the best part of many, many things that he's voiced in. He's
Yes.
just, he's got that charm that's just so intoxicating. You just can't help but watch it.
Yeah. Or listen to it in this case.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, I mean, it feels disrespectful to talk about him for so little, but there's not much notes to give on his performance. He just knocks it out of the park in every scene.
Yeah, I mean, that's him in general. He's great. He's the villain.
Yep. So yeah, next up we have Peter
Calamus.
Kalamis. Yeah, thank you. Who is the voice for Pym, the
Mm-hmm.
annoying bat sidekick. He's
Yeah.
done work on 8 other Barbie movies, and he does a mix of voice and live action work.
Mm-hmm.
I was less bothered by him than you were. Um, I felt he fit into the world a bit better than I think you did, but yeah, I wouldn't say I was blown away by his performance here.
His performance was what it was meant to be.
Yeah,
This comedic, goofy, sidekick character to be the dumb one against the main smart-ish villain.
yeah. It's the kind of character that in a kids movie like this, you just know that this is the character that the parents hate the most.
Yes.
Because, this is the type of movie where a kid will watch this over and over again every day for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And the voice that's going to stand out the most, I think, is the Pym, this bat character who is very, very annoying. And I thought he was used sparingly enough that it worked, but I could definitely see why he would get on people's nerves.
Yeah.
Yeah, up next we have Christopher Gaze as Major Mint. He's worked on 9 Barbie movies, and also has done a mix of voice and live action work. Um, very, very British performance in this movie.
Very.
That's maybe my biggest takeaway.
Yes, he's also in Death Note. He's the voice of Watari.
Yes, um, I did see that on his IMDb, and he's in quite a few things. He's also in My Little Pony. He's in Smallville. He's in one of the Bionicle movies.
Mm-hmm.
Sort
Again,
of,
the Canadian uh, people.
yes, yes, yeah. I wouldn't say I had any. I didn't think his performance was good or bad. Just that it was British, and I think that's how it was written. So,
There you go.
yep. Next up, we have Ian James Corlett as Captain Candy. He's done work on 5 other Barbie movies and also does a lot of voice work.
Yeah.
Um, he's done stuff for Scooby Doo, for Nier, the video game. And what one thing of note is that he played J. Edgar Hoover, the voice of J. Edgar Hoover in Being the Ricardos, the recent movie about Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
Not really a memorable part of that movie, but not because of his voice acting. And I would say he's not the most memorable in this Barbie movie either. Yeah,
I don't have anything to say
yeah,
besides what I said earlier. He was Goku.
yep. And we can kind of move through these last few pretty quickly. We have French Tickner as Grandfather Drosselmeyer. He was also in Death Note.
Oh, sorry. He was Watari.
Okay,
Not the other guy.
yeah.
I
Then
was
we
getting ahead of
have
myself.
Kathleen Barr, who's Aunt Drosselmeyer and also played the owl.
I love
And
Kathleen and her work. She did work in My Little Pony, of course, but yeah, I'd really love to meet her. I have not, but I would really love to. She's great.
yeah, and she doesn't really have much to do in this movie.
No.
But she has worked on 22 Barbie movies,
Mm-hmm.
so I suspect we will be talking about her quite a bit.
Then we got Kathleen Westluck,
Yep.
who I have met. She's most recently big role in My Little Pony. Fantastic person, loves to talk. She's also the voice of Nier from Death Note.
Okay. Yeah, and she's been in 8 Barbie movies.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Alex Doduk, who
I don't
plays
know
Tommy.
anything about him.
Yeah, this is his only Barbie movie. Kelly is played by Chantel Strand. She's in 7 Barbie movies. I think she's always playing the character of Kelly.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't think there was anything of note really here. Then Britt
McKillop.
McKillop as Peppermint Girl.
I am excited to see more of her work in the Barbie movies because she's in ponies and she has a fantastic singing voice, and I hope that she sings eventually in these movies. She's
Yeah,
great,
yeah.
and I've met her as well.
There are quite a few of these upcoming Barbie movies are musicals, so Yeah, and then the last person I have here as part of the cast is Danny McKinnon, who plays the gingerbread boy. This is one of two Barbie movies he's in. Again, doesn't really stand out too much in this movie. Um, yeah, and then I did also want to mention the New York City Ballet, who did the rotoscoping performance, or the not the, who did the performances that were rotoscoped.
Yeah, fantastic voice
Yeah.
acting from them.
Well, I think it's important to mention their performances,
Yes,
even though they are
yes.
voice acting,
Yeah. No, I get you.
because they are playing these characters,
Mm-hmm.
and adding a lot to what I think is the best part of the movie. Though I know we disagree. So yeah, I gave the voice acting a 5 out of 5. Mainly for Tim Curry. I think he alone sort of gets this 5 out of 5 rating. I think Kelly Sheridan also kind of does really good work here. So that's I just gave it a 5 out of 5 for
I
both
give
of
it
them.
a 4 because although I love Tim Curry, uh, I think that everyone should also be a factor into my points. So
That's fair.
everyone was good. I didn't feel like anything was bad. Even Pim, he did his job, even though I didn't really care about him. Uh, but I didn't feel like it was top tier voice
Yeah.
acting. So they're above average for me.
So yeah, we gave the average rating for this is 4.5 out of 5 for the voice acting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, now let's go on to the writing. We've kind of already discussed a lot
Yeah,
of the writing.
writing is more so how the story is told, like the dialogue,
Yeah.
um, the the character writing. The story is like the generic story. This is the actual in betweens of the story.
Yeah. I was not blown away by any of the dialogue.
No.
My note here is dialogue is fine. Um
Yeah, and that's about right.
it doesn't really stand out. There really should have been more dance numbers in my opinion. The character arc should have been a little bit better thought out. The romance should have maybe been a bit fleshed out. But yeah, it's serviceable writing.
Yeah,
I gave it a 3 out of 5.
I give it a 3 as well.
Yeah, so that's an average of 3 for the writing.
Yes.
So yeah, let's get into some of our overall thoughts and any other parting thoughts you have before we give our final scores. Um,
Yeah. I'm just gonna
I
go over my
yeah,
notes.
yeah, go for it.
Just starting with the opening of the film. Film starts up with just this musical number with fairies dancing. They give it to the credits. Um, I felt like the opening really needed sound effects because it was just very weird.
Yeah,
It
and I think
needs something there because there's stuff that the fairies were doing, but there was no sound to go with it.
yeah, I didn't mind the opening credits. I thought they were kind of fun. But yeah, I could see how maybe adding sound effects might have
Yeah,
helped it a little.
there's a lot of notes that I have for this film where sound effects are a real issue in this film.
Okay.
There's a lot that needs to be done. The models for children looking characters aren't great. There's just this is a period of time where child models were they're still trying to perfect them. They were more exaggerated and not as fun looking. Da, 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 da. Yeah, Claire's hair was something that I wanted to point out is that the hair I thought some good movement. But her hair is just a big lump with some strands at the end that give texture, which is,
Yeah.
Hair was a big thing to
And that's
figure out.
partially, I think,
Mm,
technological limits as well. Though Monsters Inc. had a lot of hair and
yeah,
fur in it.
that was their technical challenge for that film.
Yeah. Though Monsters Inc. of course had a larger budget and likely a larger production team as well. So
Of course. Clara really loves the Nutcracker
yep.
before he had a personality. She just
Yeah.
really loved it.
It's their romance is very much they're supposed to fall in love, so they do.
Yep. Yeah, my notes for when the mouse started coming up, my question was, is this whole thing going to be a dream? Is there magic involved? Is this an LSD trip? Turns out it was magic, so it happened, which was weird. I really liked the music, but the music, it was just the, the Nutcracker music. Um, Here's a big note that happened a lot in this film. There's a lot of dead silence that happened for like 5 seconds, where the characters are just standing around in between lines, and the silence is just ambiance, but very little detailed ambiance. So it's just really quiet and awkward.
Yeah, maybe a bit of an editing problem there.
Yeah, probably. The Nutcracker. I think that he needed more Nutcracker sounding sounds. Because, like, when he's walking, whenever he's moving, there really should be that click, click, click of the wood sounds. But they only
Yeah.
ever did that when they really wanted to point out specific things with his body. Like, if his arms detached, they'll make a sound for that. But generally, there wasn't really any sounds given for him. There's a line here when the snow fairies leave. I believe it was Major Mint or something. He says that, "Oh, the snow fairies left to go make blizzards." I immediately thought of Dairy Queen.
I mean, there is a shortage of workers, so I guess.
Mm, yes. The entire time I'm questioning, how does Clara's story relate to the child Kelly? Because that didn't really made clear until the end. Even still, they should have danced on the floating rocks. Rocks.
They should have.
Yes. Okay. I think the weakest dance number would be the sugar plum dance, the fairies, because the music wasn't matching the visual dance. For like big moments where you'd expect them to have better movement, but no, it was just generic for a lot of the time. I didn't really understand Clara's motivation throughout the film. I didn't really know what was going on. There's the moment where Clara goes to the prison and she tricks the guards, but I didn't understand how she did that because
It's the
they're
classic.
dumb guards, but like there's no reason for her to do that.
It's
Why
kind of
she'd
the
have that
classic.
authority? Because
The
like the Mouse
classic.
King is not known to have a girlfriend, so
I think it's just the classic. The evil villain is so strict in his rule that people will like
I know, but like
there's that famous anecdote about Stalin that as he was dying on the floor of his office, the people guarding his door wouldn't go in because he was so strict about that. So I think it's kind of playing off of that thing.
it is, but like there's no proper setup for that.
No, no.
They
Well,
just wanted to do that joke.
the setup I think is him turning the two
If
mice
she
into
had
bookends.
disguised herself as a guard, I'd buy it. But she just walks in her dress, and they're like, "Okay, woman who we've never met. I guess you're an authority figure. Okay."
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Mouse King is run off into the sewer. Major makes a remark. It's like, oh, yes, back where he belongs. I made a note that the Mouse King. I thought that was his last part of the film. Was like, huh? They're just gonna let him go. He's gonna go and spread disease. That's not a win. But anyway, the princess was with us all along. Jay,
Oh, of course. That I saw coming a mile away.
I didn't.
Oh,
When
you
there
didn't?
was no, I didn't. I was expecting the whole prince being the Nutcracker. I was waiting for the princess, and then when she was it, I was like, what? How? Why? Why was she the princess all along? It just
Yeah.
it blew my mind, and nothing made sense about it. It just happened.
I mean, I think the reason it happens is that it has to happen in this kind of movie.
Right.
It's playing into those fantasy cliches.
Right. But anyway, why does Clara know ballet?
It's the same reason everyone in the Nutcracker ballet knows ballet. That's the medium through which the characters express themselves. That's why Clara, despite being ambiguously Russian, speaks English.
Right. So so again, she wants to leave her family, but then when she goes back, she's looking for the Nutcracker. But when like Eric shows up, she immediately forgets about the Nutcracker. Like she doesn't know that Eric is the same guy. She's like, "Oh,
But
who's
she
this
does.
hottie?" He turns out to
Because they
be the same
recognize each
guy in
other.
the end, but still, like she wouldn't know that. She's just, oh, forget about my toy. This man's a hottie. They're together, I
Yeah, yeah.
guess. Why? I don't know.
Well, that is also the ending of both the original story and the ballet.
Sure.
It's kind of the best of both worlds. She gets to go back to her real life, which honestly doesn't seem all that interesting, but whatever. She gets to go back to that, and then also, like if it were me, I would just stay in the fantasy land. It looks more interesting than snowy European manor
Mm-hmm.
with the annoying little brother.
Yeah, and of course, just the main message of bravery. And if you're brave, then you'll be a princess.
Yep. That well, if you're brave, you can do ballet.
That too. That's all my
Uh,
notes for this film.
yeah, I thought it was fun. Has some dumb parts, has some good parts. Really like the ballet stuff, like I've been saying. Tim Curry steals the show. And Clara really should have had. She needed a character arc. Like, I don't think she's a bad character, but there's just no development to her.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm hoping the later Barbie movies kind of add in some character development throughout the movie. Though obviously that's a bit difficult to do because you're trying to, this is supposed to be Barbie movie, so she's supposed to be like the main character that everyone loves. Um, but I think it would have been nice if there was a little bit more development in that. So based on that, my total final score is 17 out of 25,
Mm-hmm.
which is 68%. So, above average. Not great, but not bad.
Yeah. For me, I was 16 out of 25, which was 64%. I also included another estimate, which ended up being a 3.2 out of 5. Yours ended up being
Okay.
a 3.4 out of 5.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and then our average total score is a 16.5 out of 25 points. That's a 66% overall rating.
and a 5-star
So,
rating of 3.3.
yep. So, yeah, it's an interesting movie. Very, very interesting to start out this series. But
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's a very questionable choice to start your Barbie franchise with fairy tales. Again, context of the time period would probably help, but again, this is 20 years later.
Yeah. Well, yeah, on that note, thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah.
We hope you'll join us again next week for Barbie as Rapunzel. Bye.
Bye.